Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. This past weekend, the world of bodybuilding saw a pretty close show, that being the Toronto Pro. Your top three ended up being John Jewett in third, Quentin Beastwood took the runner-up spot, and winning the show was Akeem Williams. And I saw a lot of back and forth after prejudging about who was actually going to get the dub, and even as the dust was settling, I was still seeing a lot of back and forth. These guys were pretty close, but not in the same things. They all three have very different physiques, and therein lies a lot of the debate. Now, the scorecard did have each of these guys firmly in their placings, meaning Akeem got all first place votes on the score sheet, Quentin got straight seconds, and John got straight thirds. So although they traded off and fans both in person and those viewing at home were split, the judges were pretty set on their placings. But I want to break this one down to see if John and or Quint should have placed higher, since I've seen a lot of people saying that both guys should have done so. And I just want to analyze what happened at this pretty close Toronto Pro. So let's run it back and take a look at your Toronto Pro top 3 with HD picks and do an in-depth analysis. With all that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. If you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. A lot of these poses are going to be nail biters, and I'm sure a lot of you won't agree with me. Take the front double for example. Arguments can be made for each of these guys. John has great arms, great taper, and solid legs. Overall, he creates a good X-frame. Akeem has great quads too, and the best arms up there. Quentin has the best shape up there though. He has the outline of a comic book character. As you can see, they all have compelling arguments. However, I can flip the script and point out flaws for each. Now, John does have the least impactful flaws, I'd say. The only things I could really come up with are the slightly weird sternum and the poorer quad sweep. For Akeem, it's definitely those high lats. They throw off his midsection too, since he's also crunching down on his abs, making the obliques protrude a little. And for Quentin, he's pretty soft up top and he needs more mass. But for this pose, both of those things are fairly passable. So with that, I'm going to rank these guys first to third and give them points based on their ranking, but here in this shot, keep in mind that it can go just about either way on this one. And first, I am going to put Quentin. I think he looks fantastic with his amazing proportions. And as I said, I don't really have a negative thing to say, except he could be harder upstairs and use some more size, but those things really aren't big stains on a pose like this. He looks great as is. Now in second, I went back and forth, and this really shouldn't be the case for the resident winner of this pose, Akeem Williams. He always looks so impressive in the limbs. Those quads are thick and cut up, and the biceps are huge, and they literally have striations. But the high lats and shallow abs leave a lot to be desired in the torso region. John, on the other hand, has good arms, and honestly with his huge biceps, he's hanging right there with Akeem. John also has decent legs too, not as good as Akeem's, but I would say very solid. And finally, John does have the better lats, but is that enough? Probably not for most, which is why I'm giving John third here, and I'm going to stick Akeem in second. But really, I could have John in first, to be honest. He's my favorite. In my opinion, he has it all. Hardness, conditioning, great arms, a great X-frame, and really no flaws compared to the other two. Akeem has high lats, and Quentin looks a little lanky. I can't say anything negative about John to the same effect of what I can say about the other two. He doesn't stand out the best though. Akeem and Quint just have that wow factor in this one. That's all I'm going to say for this first pose. I'm bummed to put John in third, but I think it's the right choice if there is such a thing in this pose. I could have these guys in any single arrangement and be happy. Now, I think this pose is a little more conclusive. I definitely have John here. Akeem's high lats may be okay and passable for the front double, but here in the actual front lat spread, I'm not a fan. He has the weakest lats on the stage because of that. Now, John and Quint are pretty close in the lats, which means a lot for John because he's a lot shorter than Quint. So for John's lats to look just as wide and tapered just as well, he's doing a lot right. And he has good extra parts like a thick and striated chest and good arms and delts. Plus, I really like how he executes this one. It looks great. He gets a little bonus just for putting in a little extra time to craft a good pose. Now, I'm going to put Akeem in second because he's so much bigger than Akeem structurally, and Akeem had the worst lats. So Quentin just overwhelms him too much for Akeem to get the win here. But I'm not exactly thrilled with Quentin. The legs look great and he has good lats, but the upper body conditioning is not at all where it should be. Although it's probably not that much of a conditioning problem as it is a hardness and muscle maturity issue especially. He said he gained 10 pounds between the New York Pro and this show, and we know he probably didn't grow much muscle tissue, if any at all, so most of that 10 pounds is coming from fullness. And according to most fans, it helped his overall look. But it was a double-edged sword in some shots. Like a pose like this one, he just looks way too soft up top. Compare John and Akeem's chest and delts to Quint and you'll see what I mean. Like I said though, he does get second based on the structure alone and because Akeem's lats are so poor. Now, in the side chest, I think I may have a slightly controversial call here. Quint impressed a lot of people in Toronto in the shot, and I get it, and I see it now. He's just taller and broader across the shoulders, so he commands your attention, and he looks huge despite not being the most muscular guy pound for pound. And his pecs look decent here. However, I don't have him winning. I have Akeem. This is one of his great power shots, and even though he's getting pushed in some ways by Quint, I don't think it's enough. Quint is really broad upstairs across the shoulders, so he wins in that regard, but Akeem gets him on overall thickness and muscle maturity. He's bigger in the arm and delt for sure, sure, and he's bigger in the side leg, with the better detail from quad to kneecap. So Akeem is winning both the downstairs limb and the upper limb. But the chest is where things get iffy for Akeem. He has the denser looking pecs and maybe more detailed, but with Quint's posing and just being the bigger man, his pecs look better. And when you add Quint's pecs with his superior width and compare it to Akeem's limbs and his overall thickness, this is pretty close, and Quint is going up against Akeem. Akeem has one of the best side chests out there still in this era, but Quint is looking huge. Overall though, I do prefer that extra thickness and pound for pound muscularity on Akeem's physique. Quinton is wider, but he looks lankier compared to Akeem. Now I do think John does take third to Quint's second, and this is a bit odd because John is definitely a lot more like Akeem than he is Quint, but John is not Akeem. John doesn't have the solid wins in the arm and delt and in the side leg like Akeem had. And while John is also winning on pound for pound muscularity compared to someone like Quint, with John being even more narrow and smaller structurally than Akeem, I'm still giving the second place to Quint. It makes sense. If the top two in the shot were about 50-50, why would a smaller Akeem basically beat Quint when it was already so close? And I don't think John does. But looking at all three of these guys, we can once again see how close the show was. All these guys have arguments to switch the placings around on this one. But one area where these guys are not super competitive is in the back, because John is taking this one easily. And as for Akeem, it's the usual. Akeem is losing to just about everyone in the amateur show that went on the day before this, let alone the pros. And Quinton over there looks just really soft again. Granted, his back looks completely different than it did in New York. The fullness went a long way here. It literally changed the shape of his back. The detail just isn't there. The back is smooth all around, and his lower body is just too skinny looking from the rear. The glutes and ham definition are fine, but the adductors and quad sweeps aren't impressive at all. John's back doesn't even look stellar here, although I believe it does have something to do with this photo. But even here, he has the most detailed back for sure and the thickest back. And his lower body is actually the best here too. He has the most shredded glutes, good quad sweep, and diced hams. And his overall top to bottom balance and completeness is the best as well. This one is a runaway for John. And it's basically the same thing here in the rear lat spread. John is winning for sure. He still has the thickest back and he has the best lats. Now I don't know about the widest lats, but they taper really nice and low, and again his lower body is the best. This is another one where John is solid for sure. But regardless, he was going to get a default win. Now between second and third, this is weird, and that's because Akeem is weird. His back is wide at its widest point. In fact, I think Akeem's back is probably wider than John by a little at that point, but Akeem falls off quick, literally. We know he has high lats and they're on full display here. He has a wide taper in the back, and I'm just not a fan of it. It is technically a wide taper, but taper is a strong word because again, the lats just fall off so abruptly. And with that, the lower back is just not there. The lower body is okay. He has good quad sweep and the hamstrings are okay, although I'm not the biggest fan of the shape of the hams here. They look small, they're not really, but he doesn't have the thickest looking cords back here. Overall, he's okay. He does have the width technically and an okay lower body, but the shape is just too distracting for me. But Quinton has an issue too. How is Quint as big as he is structurally, but the rear lat spread looks this narrow? It has to be a posing issue because it just looks odd when you see this huge guy taking up a lot of space on stage, but he doesn't have the widest lats, which should be an automatic for him. But Quinton's back actually looks more filled in. He at least has something going on in the mid to lower back with some okay thickness to his erectors, and his traps are decent. And in the lower body, Akeem has more girth to his thighs proportionally, but I prefer Quinton's hams and his glutes are sharper. This definitely isn't the strongest pose for either of them, but I do think Akeem is still the weaker one here. I have Quinton holding strong in the back and maybe the lower body on top of Akeem's shape just bugging me too much. So Akeem will take another last place here. But Akeem claps back big time with a huge win in the side tricep. He's known for these side shots, but he barely got away with it in the last side pose. However, this one is more like how Akeem usually does these poses, because this one is a clear win. The thickness is there for sure. His waist is also locked in, the detail in the side leg is unmatched, and his tricep is decent. Now it is technically the weakest tricep here, but again, it's decent. And he wins on everything else anyway, so I don't really think I need to go on. For second, we have another weird type of trade-off debate. Quinton is streamlined too much if you ask me. He's a little too slight to take on Akeem. However, I think he's looking okay against a smaller guy like John. It's like the side chest all over again. John is just getting too overwhelmed in the width department. And just the space aspect, like Quinton is the bigger guy, and John's extra muscularity isn't helping him out a whole lot because Quinton is just so much bigger. Quinton wins the width department and he has the better pecs. John's abs are also not the greatest from this angle, and Quinton is solid from all of them, so Quinton is also taking the midsection. And in the side leg, although John is bigger, Quinton has a lot of good detail. But the final nail in the coffin for John is the tricep. Quinton's is actually a bit meatier, plain and simple. So overall, to me, Quinton leans a bit too much in the direction of aesthetics, but he still brings great elements, and he beats John on most of these elements. So this is going to be a narrow one, but I'm giving Quinton second here. The abs and thighs is another clear one, but again, not for Akeem. Now, like in the last post, I used a top call-out photo instead of the HD pics because it was just the better option because some of the guys weren't hitting the last 2 shots in their individual routines. So I did feel it was the best option, even with the photographers there really only getting 1 photo of this one. And it was snapped at a time where Quentin is doing something a little autistic, artistic. I kind of like what he's doing, but he would have been fine with just the head-on abs and thighs without the tilt. But anyway, I watched the footage. We know what Quentin's abs look like despite a very poorly timed photo, and he's known for his aesthetics, and those things were obviously very important in this shot. So I think it's pretty easy to say he wins. I may be going out on a limb here, but I don't think so. And speaking of limbs, Quentin's quads are actually pretty respectable. He doesn't have very good sweep, but at the same time he has good development and the sharpest detail up there. Not to mention Quentin's great upper body taper and that incredibly small waist. For some out there, Quentin can win on his shape alone. But then when you put in good quads and good abs on top of that, he's easily winning this one. And in second, I have John. He kind of has that Hunter Labrada midsection going on with some slight distension at the bottom of his abs and some slight blurriness to that area too. But the rest of his midsection is peeled, including good obliques. And his remaining competition, Akeem, just doesn't have very good abs separation here. He's basically missing half the pose with that. And in the quads, I honestly prefer John from this angle. I'm dubious of that though because Akeem's quads are great and John's tend to look narrow, but I think we can agree that John is no slouch regardless. Even if Akeem does beat him, John is very good in the quads. He has great detail and great size, just not the most sweep. And even if John lost the legs, he definitely doesn't lose them by as much as Akeem loses the abs. So between both major elements of the pose, John has the better average, which grants him the second place. And finally, let's end things with the most muscular, and here, it's Akeem. He's the biggest guy up there that also doesn't have a conditioning issue. It's quite the opposite, actually. Quint is huge and full and all of that, but he looks soft. Akeem has more separation everywhere. Between muscle groups, within muscle groups, the only area that Quint is slightly better than Akeem separation-wise is in the lower body. But Akeem is thicker in the quads and he's showcasing more than enough detail to win. Still showcasing more than enough detail. Akeem beats Quint on superior density and muscle maturity. And with that, he wins things like the arms, the chest, the delts, and hey, maybe even the legs. But Akeem still does enough without them. And Akeem just goes on and beats John on straight up size. There's just not much more to say about that. So Akeem will be the solid winner of our last pose. Finally, between John and Quint, this is a tricky one. John is smaller than Akeem and is slightly less detailed, so he doesn't have all that Akeem had going for him. And Quint is just huge, very full, and that fullness wasn't making Akeem look small, but next to John, Quint looks a little bit more impressive. John is very compact and harder than Quint, but per body part, Quint gets a lot of wins. I have Quint in the lower body just by a little bit for the better separation. I have him in the abs for the same reason. And in the chest, John is just too flat and not detailed enough. I'm going with Quint here because he's just fuller. He also doesn't have that much detail, but neither does John. The same could probably be said for the arms and delts. Quentin is at least close. And of course, overall, Quentin, while not being pound for pound more muscular, he's just bigger overall and more impressive. John doesn't have any standout body parts, and he really doesn't stand out in general here, even though he looks great. In the most muscular, I have to give Quentin the nod for second, and that means John will be taking third on our final pose. And that brings us to the end of the comparison with a very, very close scorecard. Quentin is actually technically the winner based on points. He got 14, which is the lowest score out of the bunch, and for this type of scoring, the lowest score does win. However, he was not the winner based on the actual poses won. The winner of the actual amount of poses won is a tie between John and Akeem. They won 3 poses each to Quentin's 2. And John and Akeem also tied for second based on points. Overall, this is just so close that I gotta be honest, I'm just throwing out the scorecard more or less. It paints a picture, but not a very clear one in this instance, so I'll just give you my thoughts. Now again, with this being so close, I guess it would have been fine with any guy winning. However, I really don't think I would have ever given Quentin the win here, and I definitely wouldn't have agreed if he won. To be honest, I don't even really agree with him being in second, which he ended up getting. Quentin looks fantastic, his shape was unmatched in this lineup, and no one can argue that it wasn't. However, there were a few crucial problems with Quint. He lacked that proper level of muscularity. How many times in this comparison did I say he was looking a bit lanky and skinny compared to the other two guys? He just doesn't have the open bodybuilding size, and he lacks the maturity and the density in a lot of these muscle groups. And this kind of leads into the second fatal flaw for Quint, the conditioning. The legs were fine, but the upper body was notably soft. The back had no detail, the chest was doughy looking, and so on. I don't think he can win because of either of those things. He's the odd man out here, and not in a good way. He's missing 2 crucial elements, muscularity and conditioning. In my opinion, you can't win a bodybuilding show and lack in both of those categories. This is why I wouldn't have been okay with Quentin winning the show, and I don't even agree with him in second. Now as for Akeem, he had high highs, but low lows. The front double and the side shots, and even the most muscular were were good wins for Hakeem. However, Hakeem has such a massive hole in his back poses, it's not even funny. But outside of just poses, Hakeem had good conditioning, good muscle maturity, good size, and yeah, of course he had those good poses. However, in my opinion, John is the winner here. Does John have those stellar highs? No, but on the flip side, he was the most complete guy up there from every aspect. He had the decent shape, the best conditioning out of the three, good muscularity. He was the most complete top to bottom and back to front, and with that, he had the least amount of flaws. He didn't have any major holes anywhere like Quentin did with his conditioning or Hakeem did with his back. Now, I did ask you guys if you agreed with the results here from the Toronto Pro, and all the clamor I saw for Quentin and John was literally all gone by the time I asked this question. 86% of fans agreed with Hakeem winning the show. I don't know if you guys know bodybuilding, but you can't get 86% of fans to agree on anything. However, they came together on this one apparently. And sure, I can understand why Hakeem won. Again, it was so close that it could have gone a couple of ways here. Hakeem did have those crazy shots as I mentioned earlier. And with those in total, if we took Quint out of this comparison, we'd have a 4-to-4 split on the poses between John and Hakeem. So it's 50-50 even when we boil it down. But to me, completeness and conditioning matters. That's why I would have gone with John. Hakeem is bigger and more imposing, and he does have that wow factor. And that's his argument, and hey, it's a good one. It's just not one I particularly agree with over the latter. I'm okay with Hakeem winning because I see why he did. He absolutely deserved it. But that doesn't mean John also didn't deserve this win. I truly believe both of them could have won, and I would have been happy either way. And I am happy for Hakeem. I'm glad he's going back to the Olympia once more. Both did have arguments, but on the day of the show, the judges chose to go with Hakeem as the winner of the 2024 Toronto Pro. But as for me, I would have gone with John Jewett. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What did you guys think of my takes in this one, and who do you think should have won the Toronto Pro? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments. And if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. By the way, if you guys are looking for any high quality supplements to help you on your own fitness journey, be sure to check out Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, be sure to use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Get Alexia.